I'm Peter Theunis, and together with Endava, we are looking into how companies are shaping the future of payments. Along with our network of experts, we discuss payments innovation, the technology around it, and the strategies. On this episode, we have Marijke Koninckx, Chief Product Officer of BankiFi. And the topic of today that we will discuss is the evolution on open banking. Hello, Marijke. Can you please introduce yourself a little bit and tell me what you do with BankiFi?
Sure, Peter. Thanks for having me. So my name is Marijke Koninckx, as you already pointed out, and I'm Chief Product Officer at BankiFi. So we are a technology provider, and we work with banks to make sure they elevate their small business banking offering from something that is purely transactional to a true embedded banking offering. So what do we mean with embedded banking? So if you look at the world through the lens of a small business, they do need some banking products, right? They need accounts, they need cards, they need loans, etc. But managing their business is about much more than that. It also involves things around invoicing, accounting, etc. So what we do is we provide banks with the technology to actually bring that into their existing channels. Talking about payment services, collections, but also accounting, invoicing, working capital optimization, cash flow forecasting, etc. So it's about creating that holistic experience for small businesses. And actually, everything we do is enabled by open banking. So open banking as a, let's say, market trend or evolution in the way the banking and payment systems work is actually instrumental to the type of service that we deliver.
Okay, so you're the right person for this talk. Now, open banking has started years ago in the UK and Europe, but now you see there are global initiatives. There are initiatives that are probably even more exciting in other parts of the world. What's your view on this global trend and the activities going on?
Yeah, I think it's whether we want to call it a trend or if it's even become mainstream, that's probably a different topic. So if you look at the way the market is set up at the moment, I think we're already above 60 countries that have adopted open banking in some way, shape or form. So some of these initiatives are very much regulatory driven, like PSD2 in Europe and UK open banking being a good example. We also have some really exciting initiatives going on in Australia, but I'll talk about that just in a minute. And in other markets, you see that it's really the market that has picked up the notion of open banking, where both the banks and the financial service providers see the need and the usage of open banking use cases. Like in the US, there's no regulatory involvement at this point. It may come, but it's purely stemming from the need to innovate and be able to deliver better services much quicker. So when you look at all those different initiatives, the scope, the timelines, whether it's regulated or not, is vastly different. But there are a few things which I think are quite interesting to point out. So if you look at the UK as an example, this is an initiative where the regulator was very heavily involved. And if you see where open banking stands today, it's actually quite impressive if you look at the numbers. Just I think 2 weeks ago, there was an announcement that open banking has reached about 5 million users, and I believe that over 26 million payments have been made on the open banking rails last year. So it's not something that's happening in a niche somewhere anymore. It's really become more widely adopted. And when you look at what's to come for the UK, there's some really, really exciting things ahead, like the market's going to adopt variable recurring payments, which I think is going to be a game changer when it comes to providing alternatives to products like direct debits or cards or anything like that. And also when it comes to the convenience and the use of open banking, there's a shift in, let's say, responsibility from the bank to the third-party provider when it comes to re-authenticating access and that sort of stuff. Now, in Europe, I would say things are still very fragmented. I think the adoption is still slightly disappointed, to be honest. So hopefully there will be some more collaboration between different parties in the European market to accelerate the adoption of open banking. What is also, I think, very interesting to look at is what's happening in Australia. So in Australia, the scope of open banking is actually much broader. So it's not just about being able to access transactions on a bank account, but also other things like energy, utility companies, etc., are all brought in scope. And I think that's a very interesting evolution.
Yeah. Okay. I see this also in MENA, where I'm involved in a number of projects where they are much more flexible in the use cases that are there. If you see in our region, let's say Europe and UK, open banking is often evaluated against card payments, which is one of the use cases. Now, where do you see for the advantages and disadvantages of open banking versus cards?
That's a good question. So we very much look at this through a lens of a small business. Yeah. So it's not a person-to-person payment use case or very large corporate B2B type of scenarios. So I was always convinced, to be honest, that payment rails don't matter to end users. Yeah. So, I mean, a payment is a payment, you just want to receive the money. Now, actually, the more we work on this and look into this, the more I disagree with myself. Yeah. So the payment rails, they do matter, and not in the same way they do matter to payments people like ourselves, you know, who have been living and breathing this for years. But if you look at this from a small business point of view, there's a few things like cards. If you want to be able to accept cards, you need to go through a merchant onboarding process. Especially for micro businesses, I think this is quite a heavyweight process. There's a lot involved. You need to provide a lot of information in order to be onboarded as a merchant. Yeah. So that's already one difference. Everyone can be a merchant in open banking. There's no registration required, etc. You can receive a payment if you have a bank account. It's as simple as that. Now, there are a few other things which are also important, and that's the nature of how these different payment instruments work. So if you look at open banking, and especially based on instant payments, the payment lands in your bank account immediately. There are no fees levied, etc. If you look at that purely from a cash flow management point of view, but also from an accounting point of view, this is extremely simple. If you look at a card payment, you'll receive the settlement a couple of days after the authorization, etc. So that makes the whole matching and reconciliation process in the accounting much more complex. So this doesn't have to do anything with payments per se, but this has to do with the whole end-to-end flow where payments are a piece of the puzzle. And there I do see a lot of differences.
If I would take the defense of the card side against you, there are today's also ways, and there are acquirers who do a 15-minute payout of amounts and things like that. So you have these advantages. But also, I think open banking still is somewhere struggling with the acceptance network, which, let's say, the card schemes have.
Yes and no. So I think when it comes to the merchant cash advance type of scenario that you just described, definitely that has an impact on the timing when the money lands in your account. It doesn't change the fact that you're going to have to pay fees, which is not necessarily the case for open banking. So that's one thing. Now, there's also a lot to be said for cards. So when it comes to, let's now look at the payer side. People are very much used to pay with their cards in shops, online, etc. So it's a process that everyone understands, that everyone trusts, etc. Open banking, I do see when it comes to making a payment through open banking, there is a huge difference between individual banks. And this is purely how the bank of the payer manages the process. In some cases, it's as simple as putting your face in front of your mobile phone to authorize the payment. There are other cases, for example, I've used some open banking payments myself here, where actually I prefer to just open my mobile banking and do a regular bank transfer, because that means I just authenticate once. Well, if I follow the open banking flow, I need to find my card, my customer number, etc., in order to be even make a payment. Yeah. So I do think there's a lot of room for improvement. There's something to say for the, let's say, the fact that people are used to making card payments, but I also see some really, really good user experiences in open banking. So
you see a lot of analysts writing the end of cards or the start of open banking, but to my idea, personal idea, the next 10, 15 years, they will co-reside and will have their strengths and weaknesses at both sides in that perspective.
Yes, and to that point, Peter, it's for us one of the things that we have implemented in addition to open banking payments is cards. Yeah. Because for a number of reasons, some people still want to pay with their cards. You have known dispute management or dispute processes that can be followed, etc. So I think the choice is gonna need to stay at least for quite a while longer.
Yeah. Now, Marijke, we talk always about open banking, but the majority that is always talked about is payments. Yeah. And also at the other end, you also see open banking has to evaluate or to grow to open finance. This is still a way to go, as today most of, to my idea, personal idea, the most of the use cases have involved in payments. Now, how do you see that? Where do you see the areas within financial services in general that is most suitable to get this evolution?
Well, actually, I think that if you look at the use of open banking, you might be surprised that actually a lot of the use cases are more built on the account information side of things than payments. Yeah. So I think the adoption of accessing account information is actually greater than using open banking payments. Again, looking back at the business banking context, there's a lot of automation that can be achieved around the area of accounting, invoice management, etc., through open banking. There is also a lot of applicability when it comes to cash flow forecasting. So in cash flow forecasting, what you can do is you actually can marry different sets of data, as in you can identify what's going on the bank account, identify any one of payments, recurring payments, salaries, taxes, that sort of stuff, direct debits, and so on. And then combine that with all the payables and receivables data you can get from accounting packages. And that's actually a way where you can provide cash flow forecasting services, which are typically only available to larger corporates with more complex products, to a much broader set of small businesses. So it's about democratizing services that were available to larger organizations before. And then there's also a very obvious one, and which is around identifying lending opportunities. So both the identification of the lending opportunity as well as the application for a certain type of credit can be automated much more when using AIS data. And actually, one of the funny things about this is that when you look at some of the BNPL providers, they actually will use AIS to do credit scoring. So it's not just for small businesses, but also in these types of use cases.
So I think even in that case, if you talk about there is still also a big use case to my idea in insurance sector within financial services. I think that's still an aspect we don't have regrettable the time to deep dive in there. So Marijke, with this we are going to conclude. Thank you for joining us on Payment Talks. And thanks for participating in this conversation. So we're looking forward and excited also to see what you will do with Bankify in this year and the next. And thank you again for your attendance.
Well, thank you for having me.
In these closing remarks of this very interesting session about the evolution of open banking, I would like to draw the attention that Endava is the trusted party for a lot of banks and payment organizations in Europe, UK, and Middle East to develop their open banking solutions. I would like to thank you all for joining us on Payment Talks and hope to see you again next month as we continue to explore the digital frontiers in the payments industry. Have a nice day.